Was Hamlet really crazy?
It's a lot of juicy stuff to play with.
It's just juicy.
Hi everybody, Chad Bradford and
Sharon Combs.
back again. To talk about Hamlet, the Prince of Denmark.
Hamlet, avenge me!
Yeah, it's a good Hamlet face. So, let's start things off with some questions.
Yeah, Hamlet is actually, I think, the longest of all the plays. So it's definitely got its own challenges in that way. It has the most amount of words. And one of the largest casts, I imagine. I don't know if it's the largest cast, per se.
And I think that brings up a great point about when you're going into some work like this, the amount of stamina an actor needs. So the length of the play does really challenge an actor to stay present at all times.
Definitely. And, you know, you talk about actors being in shape. It doesn't mean what we typically think of as in shape, per se, of looking a certain way or whatever. It's the endurance to stay that focused for that that amount of time, as well as vocal health. Being able to vocally, I mean, your voice is a muscle as well. So if it's not prepared to speak for that long in that way, it won't be ready to do it. So you have to practice and train that. And so it takes a lot of training to get to a place as an actor to be able to do 8 shows of Hamlet a week.
And the cool thing I think about Shakespeare, much like Greek theater being total theater, much like musical theater being that includes music, singing, and dance. Hamlet does the same thing. Ophelia has songs. You may not have big dance numbers, but you have huge stage combat scenes like at the very end between Hamlet and Laertes. So it takes a lot of stamina and it takes a lot of hard work, but it's all worth it in the end.
Yeah. And as such, when things get cut and moved around, you can also switch the size of the cast, because to do every single character as a different actor is honestly just very, very expensive.
Right.
You're paying each person to be there if it's a professional company, and that's not feasible. A lot of times to problem solve, and also for fun, they will double actors.
Right. And I think that dovetails perfectly into the next question. Now then, there's been groups like Shake on the Lake that does a lot of doubling that Sharon was alluding to.
In Richard III, I played I think
Hastings,
Lady
Prince
Anne.
Edward, Lady Anne, and young Elizabeth.
Oh, yeah. Oh, and I was a citizen.
5 parts.
I got really excited.
Yeah, she did. So good. So there's companies like Shake on the Lake that does that. Bedlam Theater in New York actually did a 4-person Hamlet. So yes, it's difficult to find those actors that are able to do all that.
What do you think, Chad Bradford, director extraordinaire?
Well, so as far as adding punctuation or taking it out, I think that you'll remember from the first video that Sharon and I did, we went through Othello. Now, basically when you're going through and cutting a script, at least the way that I do it, you're looking at the folio, you're looking at quartos, and then you're looking at a bunch of scholarly research. It's not so much about how I think Shakespeare is supposed to be performed, but what's going to work for our production. So that's how you go about finding what you want to do. What do you want to say as an artist? And that leads you to the kind of version that you want to do. What's the story that you want to tell? For the Hamlet that Shake on the Lake is planning on in the future, I don't think that we've decided about what text, because it's a very long and arduous process and making a decision about what's right, what's really speaking to you. So in thinking about where we want to draw our inspiration for our production of Hamlet at Shake on the Lake, we can look at all of the different versions. Now then, Hamlet was first performed around 1600, and the first quarto came out in 1603. Now, there's an interesting thing about the first quarto. It's also known as the bad quarto. And it's not only because it's been naughty.
He's a naughty boy!
No, it's because there's a lot of textual inconsistencies between the bad quarto and then later versions like Q2 and the first folio. One of the major ones being the number of lines. The bad quarto contains about 2,200 lines, still a long play, but still much shorter than the versions that you get later on. Q2 and the first folio have somewhere around 3,800 lines. Now, of course, with that kind of difference, you're going to get more scenes, more poetry. The biggest textual inconsistency probably happens in what we know as Act 3, Scene 1, but the bad quarto kind of backs up and puts into Act 2, Scene 2, and that's the soliloquy which begins with the famous words, to be or not to be. Now, if you look at the first folio and probably every single filmed version, I don't know that for sure, you're going to hear that line, to be or not to be. That is the question.
To be or not to be?
To be or not to be? That is the question.
Be or not to be?
To be or not to be?
To be or not to be? That is the question.
However, if you look at that line in the bad quarto, you'll hear it a little differently. It may seem a little flatter, and it might have a little less music and passion to it. It says, to be or not to be? Aye, there's the point. I don't know about you, but I kind of like the other ones better. Nice.
So the question was worded as, what emotion would you try to convey? And I know this because as you're reading it, you're sensing so many different emotions and themes kind of coming out within the soliloquy. Emotion is a result of something. It's an outcome of thoughts that you're having. The beauty of a soliloquy is that it's really the character's inner thoughts conveyed directly to the audience in most instances. I mean, I guess that's you could interpret that differently, but I would say most of the time it's you're engaging in a dialogue about the innermost thoughts that you're having with the audience. And so you're not thinking so much as what emotion is this, but what are all the thoughts that bring you to that place where the monologue is? So what's driving the soliloquy? Are you asking a question? And how many different paths do you go down to answer it, particularly with like the to be or not to be speech? Which is
the thing that really opened up soliloquies for me was the concept that they aren't happening necessarily in the dark, that you are reaching across that invisible fourth wall and you are connecting with the audience. You are casting the audience as your ally, or somebody that's going to be complicit in what you're doing, or somebody that's going to give you advice. All that to say, rather than picking an emotion ahead of time and saying, I'm just going to be sad right here, I think it's the actor's job to figure out, what do you want from your scene partner? And in this case, your scene partner is the audience in a soliloquy. This, how interesting it is to just watch her think the thought and then have the realization, right? And I think that's part of what you're doing. You're working it out with the audience.
Yeah, you as an audience are very, very smart. And you will always know when an actor is only playing emotion because they don't believe in what they're doing or they're not living the moment as real as we expect it to be. And so if you're aiming for emotion, you're probably not invested in the circumstances enough. The circumstances and your belief in them give you the emotion. that ultimately arises out of those thoughts.
Yeah.
And you don't really have to work at it. So is it confused, angry, sad? It's all of those things. And they'll express differently based on the actor and where they are, you know, in their interpretation of the thing.
Right, because the emotion actually comes more as a result of whether or not you're getting what you want.
Definitely. Are you answering the question that you went in asking? Or how frustrating is it to not know that answer yet? And
yeah, that's good.
You know, and that kind of a thing. So I think as an actor and as a director and as a creative in general, you're always looking for your own personal way in. Like, what do you connect with? You can't worry about, are we doing the same thing as everybody else? Because you're all doing the same play. So there's going to be crossover of interpretations. But yeah, how is it always fresh and new every time you perform it, every time an audience comes to see it?
Right.
And that is your own personal connection to the material and what that is.
Director. And so it's really about what is the story you want to tell and what's really exciting to you.
It comes down to interpretation again, like that there isn't one way to do it. How is it relevant today? What is it about seeing this play in today's society? What do we read from it now that we wouldn't have read from it 30 years ago?
One thing I've heard Sharon say and other great artists say is, why this play, why now? And that's how you get to the heart of what really excites you about something sometimes.
You know, I have always wanted to do the Ophelia Hamlet nunnery scene. I have never been Ophelia. I was the player queen in college, and
other parts.
I was a nurse that's not in the play. That was a made-up character.
That happens sometimes.
She's not.
She was brilliant, though.
Was very good.
What about the nunnery scene?
I think because it really gets to the heart of their relationship, and what is driving Ophelia. You know, we talk about Ophelia being crazy and driven mad, and I think that is the challenge of it.
Yeah.
It's a really, really difficult scene.
It's a lot of juicy stuff to play with.
It's just juicy. And I think it's like one of those ultimate challenge for an actor scene.
Yeah. I haven't...
Oh, yeah, he performed Hamlet already.
It was a lot of fun. But I think my favorite scene to perform was... the scenes leading up to during the whole playing the play within a play for Claudius. That scene, because you're working on multiple levels. Not only is it a play within a play, you're an actor kind of playing a part who's playing a part.
I'm confused.
So there's all these levels. But just this idea that you are playing actor, stage manager, and that there's another level of it that you're having to deal with. And having to balance all that was always a lot of fun. And also getting the chance to be like, to look at Claudius and to see what he's doing, to check in with all these people. You have to be alive in every single moment of that. And it's just a lot of fun. I love that. I love it.
Because I think something happens in every rehearsal process where you try something and they're like, let's try the opposite of that.
Let me try that again. That was terrible.
And over time, it rolls off my back. And so part of your training is kind of getting good at saying, okay, I will try it that way. If you really, really disagree, then you can have a conversation about, well, why do you, just out of curiosity, why do you feel like it's this way? I'm having trouble connecting with it. I'm not sure if I follow it. And those are good conversations to have instead of trying it, not understanding why you're doing it. And you have to remember that they're taking in a whole production and not just your part within it. And it's not all about you. And so once you kind of see the whole picture, it all usually ends up working out.
You know, for me as a director, I don't. If you want to try something, just do it. Just do it. Don't ask for permission. Because then we start talking about it and ripping it apart, and you might dismiss something that's actually truly brilliant.
Yeah.
Acting is about taking risks. It's a challenging but beautiful balance that you have to play with vulnerability and confidence.
But there's something fun about it always being a rehearsal.
Yeah.
There's always another shot, and you'll have another go at it. and
Right.
it'll all be great.
And if you look at and I always think it's fun when you look at the root of that word, rehearsal, to rehear something. That every time you're doing it, you're rehearing it and going deeper and finding new things about the script and about your character.
That's really good.
Thanks.
I hadn't thought of it that way.
I think that Hamlet is feigning madness for a good portion of it. And I think it's important when you talk about the word mad, that's a very broad term. Does that word mad mean that someone has lost complete control of what they're doing? You know what I mean? Because today we live in a society where we know that mental illness is a really, there's a wide spectrum of things that people can have to deal with, right? And so does he lose control? I think so. Is he able to bring himself back to a place that we would objectively deem reality? Maybe not all the time. So I want to answer that a little bit more delicately than people perhaps have in the past. Because I think that we all have the capacity to go mad in that sense.
Yeah, and if you look at the circumstance that he's in, specifically, and the things that happen because of it, how would you respond if you were in that position? Would you stay completely level-headed and normal? Yeah, probably not. Right. I think as an actor, your point of view, you can't really say, I'm just crazy.
Right. That's the thing, is that even when you're approaching the character of Hamlet, you can't go in saying, all right, I'm crazy here, so I'm just gonna... Right? Same with when you're Edgar in King Lear. Same when you're any of these characters in Shakespeare that are feigning some other state of being or feigning to be another person. You have to come up with clearly what you're doing. When Edgar in King Lear is saying all this stuff that we would deem gibberish, his character knows what he's saying and wants it to be efficacious. He's doing it for a reason. Hamlet is doing everything for a reason. So it's a delicate question about madness.
There's like this deep sense of loss within him and a longing for normalcy and a missing for what's not there. You know, really missing and a lack of acceptance for the change that's occurred. And so I wonder if, you know, Shakespeare felt some of that after the loss of his son, that just wishing he didn't have to accept any changes. There is this like overwhelming sense of loss and family being and the importance of family and what happens when family is broken apart.
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes from him is that all art is autobiographical. Now, what does that mean? Within each piece of art that we create is contained bits and pieces from our own lived experience, whether we are attempting to put them there or not. If I'm writing music, there may be a sweet strain of a melody that perhaps I heard as a little boy growing up in the Southern church, that all of a sudden it bubbles to the surface. Now then, that's telling on me. That's saying, look, here's a little bit of his background here in this thing, and I might be writing something that's a space rock opera, but here's this little bit of a melody that's coming out. And so I think that whether or not we can definitively say his son died this day and therefore X, Y, and Z is in the play, we can say that every bit of Shakespeare's lived experience is going into his material. So I think, again, referencing the question before, if all art is autobiographical, then there's no way that we can do these pieces or perform these purple passages without them having our inherent personal flair within them. Don't you agree?
Yeah. You're always bringing a little bit of yourself to every role that you play.
Right.
So don't try to recreate when someone else did. And then it won't be so hard. Just approach it like it's a new piece of writing.
Right. As an actor, as an artist, one of the best pieces of advice I ever got was realizing that already you're enough. What you have is enough. And that goes with your academic work and your life as a human too.
With everything.
But I
You are enough.
Yes, I found that particularly helpful because if you try to say, well, I'm going to be different.
I'm different.
Because I'm going to wear my hat like this and stand upside down. You know, if you're trying to be different just for the sake of being different, it's going to feel contrived rather than truthfully responding to the text.
Yeah. I think that we grow up thinking that it's hard to understand. And there is value in realizing that there is nothing that you can't understand. And that these stories are very universal.
I think the universality is a big point. Between 1500 and 1616, Shakespeare died in 1616. How many playwrights were there?
What are you getting at?
There were hundreds, right? Around the world.
Yeah.
People, all types of people writing different kinds of things. Even people not writing things, people just performing things. 500 years later, there's not a person that graduates high school that hasn't heard of Shakespeare. Now, I think that that's for a lot of reasons. One, it's because the poetry and the kind of literary skills that you acquire when encountering this genius kind of work, the benefits from that are enormous. But I think it's also because these plays touch something deep within us. When you go through Othello and you get to the end and you see Othello realizing that he's been in the wrong the whole time, we've all had that feeling of instant regret. When Hamlet hears that his father has passed away and that, oh my gosh, someone saw him, that kind of disbelief. We've all heard something. Maybe someone's passed away. Maybe we've gotten some really bad news and our first instinct is to disbelieve it. We know what that feels like. So Shakespeare is always dealing with these things that aren't necessarily domestic and so makes them feel far away. But the emotions, the situations, and the kinds of conditions of the human soul that he encounters are things that we all understand. And that's why I think it's important. I've learned a lot from reading and performing in Shakespeare. What's the quote? The unexamined life is not worth living.
Art just helps us examine life more thoroughly.
Right.
So, yeah, does every person have to learn it? No. But does it tend to benefit us in a weird way? Yes. Yeah, because the feelings and the experiences and just the real humanity of them is so universal. There will be different points in your life where these stories will have meaning for you.
Yeah.
That, you know, even if the first time you read them right now, they don't. I just think we shouldn't ever shut out anything.
Right.
I don't know.
So the word for the day is...
So yes, it has value.
Okay.
I don't know. That was the long answer. You're going to have to...
Oh, we got to say bye. Thanks for joining us today. Yes. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Sharon Combs.
And I'm Chad Bradford.
See you next time.
Bye. Yeah.
So yeah,
I'm so sorry to interrupt.
take 2 for flatulence. However, if you look at the bad quarto, you get the flat. Oh my god, I'm gonna die. That's okay. That's totally fine. Oh, yes. There's a camera here. So...
It says yes.